In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. My son, Harry, who is now 24, has always been a good athlete. And he was very active in team sports in school and in the Episcopal community program in Rochford when he was growing up. Soccer was probably his best sport. But the high school he attended had one of the best soccer programs in the Northeast, and he started there at the bottom of the ladder. Harry was one of those kids who always saw the glasses half full, but unfortunately he also expected it to be half full without his actually doing anything about it. He was always able to get by on talent. He was always pretty relaxed about preparation and practice, which drove me crazy. But when he finally made the JV soccer team his junior year, I could see the beginning of a change in that attitude. And it went to a whole new level the next year when he tried out for and made the varsity as a senior. Harry was a bench warmer on that team. He only got to about half the games, but he was more proud of having made that varsity soccer team than of anything else in his high school career. And there are things that he learned in that process that have thankfully stayed with him. The importance of staying in good shape and of eating right and how that affects everything you do. It's not just sports. But much more importantly, the result that you get and how you feel about yourself when you give your best effort and you do that consistently. A few days ago, he was home for a couple of days, and I asked him what it was that had changed his approach, what motivated him that last year in high school. I thought it was because of his coach, who I know, who was a great guy. I know Harry thought very highly of him, but he said, no, the coach has something to do with it, but it was more the team. That was just what you did when you were on varsity. Everybody was doing it, so you did. They all had that same commitment, that same understanding of what it was that they were all doing together and what was necessary to maintain that level. They all lifted up each other that way. I asked Harry that question actually because I had read the gospel. I was working on the sermon, and I thought it might relate to something in the gospel, something essential about what it means to be a Christian, especially as we are about to enter the season of Lent that starts next week, which is our annual checkup, a time of self-examination, and it's good to have this kind of thing in mind. Today's reading from Luke's Gospel and the one we heard last week are taken from what's traditionally called the Sermon on the Plain. It has a lot in common with the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, but in Luke, Jesus speaks to his disciples with a great crowd around them on a level place. In the King James Version, it's a plain, hence the name. In the Old Testament, in the prophets, a level place or a flat place often means a troubled place, one of suffering, mourning, hunger, idolatry, disgrace. So, in speaking to us from a flat place, Jesus is speaking not from a holy place up on a mountain, where people, including Jesus, usually go to be with God, but down here, in this messy, gone wrong world that we live in every day, and where we don't think to look for God's presence, because why would God possibly be here? Jesus begins today's passage with these words, I say to you that listen. So he's not really speaking to everybody that's there. He is addressing a group within the crowd, whoever that is, those that listen. In the gospel story, it's the disciples, but of course in God's truth, Jesus is speaking to us. We are among those that listen to Jesus Christ, because we know that Christ is to be paid attention to. In his voice, we hear the voice of God. We are listening in the first place because each one of us has had some personal experience, one way or other, of the love of God in Christ. That's why we're the ones that listen. We might each of us describe that experience in different ways, but that's what it is. Thank God. Now, it's important to remind ourselves what we mean when we talk about the love of God. In the New Testament, there are 4 Greek words which we translated to English as love. One is philia, which means friendship or brotherly love, which is traditionally called, which means sisterly love. One is eros, which means sexual or romantic love. One is storge, which is the love of one family member for another, which reminds me of a line from the comedian Martin Mull, who said that when he sees a sign that says family restaurant, he knows it's full of tables for 6 and everybody's yelling at one another. But by far the most important word in the New Testament that we translate as love is agape. This is the word that Jesus uses, and it is the love that God has for humankind. This love is infinite and unreserved. It is the love that is given without any expectation of getting anything in return. And it's totally over the top. It goes way past what you would expect. It is love for lost and fallen people, which is to say that it's love for all people. And this love is active. Agape does things and is self-starting. This is the love that Jesus describes in the parable of the prodigal son, the love of the father who suddenly sees his wayward, wasteful son who has been gone from home for years on God knows how many self-destructive fool's errands, and as soon as the father catches sight of him from far away, without knowing anything about his present state of mind, whether he's repentant or regretful or more stubborn than ever, it doesn't matter. The father runs toward him and grabs him in a bear hug and shouts orders to his servants to prepare the biggest party that they've ever had to welcome home his son, whom he loves more than ever. This is the love that Jesus calls us to in today's gospel story. The love that we are to practice, to live out. Jesus says to us that listen, that we have a higher responsibility than those who, for whatever reason, aren't listening or don't listen. Those who don't hear that voice. This is the standard he sets for those that listen to him. If we love only those who love us, if we lend only to those from whom we expect to be paid back, if we are good, if we do good only to those who do good to us, none of that is the love of God. And when we ignore the truth of the love of God for us and within us, we're not living up to our responsibility. This is where it relates to Harry's experience on the soccer team. This is what you do when you're on the varsity. And let's just pause for a second and enjoy a big laugh at what Jesus varsity looks like. The most unlikely looking varsity in the universe, and includes people who don't even know they're on the squad. But we do the same thing. We try to give our best, and we lift each other up. We who listen. This is our responsibility of us who listen. There's actually a practical example of all this in today's Old Testament lesson from Genesis. And that's the climax of the story of Joseph and his brothers. This was a conflicted family. Joseph was favored over his brothers by their father Jacob, gave him the coat of many colors. Joseph bragged to his brothers about dreams he had of a future in which he would lord it over them. And they gave it back to him in spades. They plotted to kill him, they threw him into a cistern, and then in their mercy, merely sold him into slavery into Egypt. And many years later, they come to Egypt in today's story to buy grain because of the famine that's in their land. And they have to apply for this to Joseph, whom they don't recognize. They don't know it's him, who has become very powerful and whom and they don't recognize because it's been so long. And in today's reading, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and proclaims the hand of God to have been at work in the whole thing. Joseph says it was God who sent me here, not you. It was God who raised me up to be a favorite of Pharaoh. God who put me in charge of all his house. God sent me here to preserve life, preserve your life and those of your descendants. In this proclamation of the presence of God, Joseph brings the love of God into all their lives. This is loving your enemies. And in doing this, he rids himself of the bitterness and desire for revenge that would naturally be his. And he frees his brothers from the guilt and the shame and the fear that would naturally be theirs. This is the kind of thing that can happen When agape, the love of God, flows through us. That's what it is. And impossible as it seems that we can live up to it, as when Jesus tells us to love our enemies. In those times when we try, when we just let it happen, new worlds open. And we can see what Jesus means when he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Thanks be to God.